Some movies just flop, but these underrated films from the 1960s left wreckage behind. Directors got fired mid-shoot. Studios were nearly bankrupted. There were lawsuits, riots, censorship, actual Soviet tanks rolling through production, and one movie even triggered an official statement from the Vatican. This one just might be the weirdest movie from Paul Newman's career, a World War II comedy where Newman's character is basically America's best military escape artist. He's a cocky private who the army parachutes behind enemy lines to rescue 5 generals who got captured. But the generals aren't exactly suffering. They're being held in a fancy villa in Italy, pretty much living comfortably. The whole film is a strange mix of slapstick comedy and war drama that never really finds its balance. Jack Smite directed this, and he'd just finished working with Newman on Harper, so he pushed hard to get Newman again. They paid Newman over $1 million for this one role. That's huge money in 1968. Universal Studios thought Newman alone would make the film work, but they were wrong. The budget ballooned past $6 million, and critics absolutely shredded it. Roger Ebert said, "I've seen lousy movies before, but never one that seemed ashamed of itself." And Newman seemed to agree. He distanced himself completely afterward and never brought it up again. The movie flopped badly, made about half its budget back. This one's genuinely bizarre, and unlike anything Burt Lancaster ever did. Lancaster plays a suburban guy who suddenly decides to swim home by going from backyard pool to backyard pool across his wealthy neighborhood. But as he moves along, each new encounter turns darker. Basically, the whole film is one big metaphor for denial, alienation, and this guy's emotional breakdown. Making it was chaos. Director Frank Perry was actually fired midway through shooting. The studio quietly brought in Sidney Pollack, who shot several crucial scenes, including a completely new ending. Lancaster argued constantly with both directors, especially when they made him do reshoots months later. By that point, he looked visibly older, and he had to wear a wig, making the movie feel even stranger. Budget was around $1 million, but it completely tanked at theaters, barely making $200,000. It got pulled fast and disappeared. Sam Peckinpah directed Charlton Heston in this messy, epic western. Heston plays a disgraced Union officer leading this ragtag crew, including Confederate prisoners, down into Mexico to hunt Apaches. Peckinpah saw it as a 3-hour revisionist epic. Columbia Pictures had other ideas. From the very start, Peckinpah clashed non-stop with producer Jerry Bressler and the studio. Right before shooting began, Columbia cut his budget by a full $1.5 million. Then, when he finished filming, they went ahead and chopped 40 whole minutes from his final cut without asking him. Peckinpah fought with everyone. He drank too much, argued with actors, and nearly got himself fired during production. The final version that Columbia released was butchered, just a complete mess, confusingly paced, and critics didn't hold back. They called it bloated, overly ambitious, and unfocused. The film cost about $4.5 million and only pulled in around $3 million. Peckinpah himself called it the most painful experience of his career. They finally released a restored version with missing scenes back in 2005, but Peckinpah's original vision is still lost. This one's about the Boxer Rebellion in China, around 1900. You've got Charlton Heston as a tough-as-nails US Marine leading an international group trying to hold off thousands of Chinese fighters in Peking. And honestly, it's pretty fun seeing soldiers from all these different countries teaming up. Almost feels like an Olympics parade at points. Tons of big siege scenes, fights, explosions. But behind the scenes, it was a total disaster. Charlton Heston and Ava Gardner starred together, and they absolutely hated each other. He thought she was a total mess, drinking way too much, completely unprofessional. She thought he was this stiff, boring guy. Chemistry was basically zero. Even worse, director Nicholas Ray completely melted down halfway through filming. The production was a nightmare. He fought constantly with producer Samuel Bronston, had a full mental breakdown, and ended up getting fired before finishing. Ava Gardner eventually had enough too. She straight up walked off set and never came back, so they had to shoot her scenes with a body double. China banned the film outright, and even with Charlton Heston's name, the chaos sank it at the box office. It lost millions, and most people today barely remember it even exists. This one's based on the true story of the Ludendorff Bridge. World War II, last days in Germany, Americans pushing forward, Nazis desperately trying to blow up their own bridge before they lose it. They filmed in Czechoslovakia, back when it was still communist, right when the Soviets decided to invade the country in 1968. Suddenly, the film crew found themselves smack in the middle of actual Soviet tanks rolling through Prague. Filmmakers barely escaped with the film reels, and the Czechoslovak government literally accused them of sabotage. Obviously, all this ballooned the costs way beyond their original budget. Insurance didn't cover a Soviet invasion, so United Artists was stuck footing the bill. When it finally came out, it totally bombed, didn't even crack 2 million. Michael Caine stars in this grimy, super cynical World War II thriller. He's forced to lead a squad of criminals on a suicide mission across North Africa. Think something like Dirty Dozen, but even nastier. Nobody likes each other, nobody gets along, zero heroism anywhere in sight. Production was a mess from day one. Original director quit or got fired, depending who you ask, before they even started filming. André de Toth stepped in, but he had a totally different style, way more into action and explosions, didn't care at all about story or characters. Caine openly admitted later that it was one of the worst film experiences of his entire career. United Artists hoped for a Guns of Navarone hit. Didn't get it. The movie got completely buried under all the other great war films in 1969. Barely made a third of its money back. Funny enough, now people look at it as an early example of those brutally realistic war films we got way later. Martin Scorsese himself praised it for its nihilism and mean attitude, but at the time it was a massive flop. Here's a weird one. Basically a murder mystery set during World War II. Omar Sharif plays a German intelligence officer investigating a murder, and the suspects are high-ranking Nazi generals, one played by Peter O'Toole. Sounds interesting, but the movie tried to mix murder mystery stuff with war epic scenes and Nazi decadence, totally all over the place, tone-wise. Behind the camera, things were just as messy. Producer Sam Spiegel wanted another Lawrence of Arabia, banking entirely on Peter O'Toole's star power. But production was chaotic. Constant rewrites, reshoots in multiple countries like France, Germany, and Poland just to meet co-production obligations. Budget spiraled out of control. It opened to pretty weak reviews, barely made half its money back, and both Sharif and O'Toole later distanced themselves from it. This is the movie that famously nearly destroyed its studio. You've got Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, Richard Burton as Mark Antony, and what was meant to be a big, prestigious epic turned into one of the most expensive movies ever made. It was supposed to cost around $2 million. It ended up over $40 million, which today would be about $430 million. Totally insane money at the time. Elizabeth Taylor alone got $1 million salary up front, plus a piece of the profits. Things started going wrong right away. The first director quit when Taylor kept getting sick, forcing production to shut down completely. They threw out everything they already shot in London and moved the whole production to Rome. That meant rebuilding gigantic sets from scratch, and Joseph Mankiewicz, who took over directing, shot so much new footage that the studio thought about releasing it as 2 separate movies. But no, they went with one massive 4-hour film. And if all that wasn't messy enough, Taylor and Burton started their famous affair right there on set. It became a huge scandal, so big the Vatican actually issued an official statement calling them out for erotic vagrancy. Even with all the craziness, Cleopatra actually did make money. $57 million in the US, making it the biggest hit that year. But it still wasn't nearly enough. 20th Century Fox posted losses of $40 million, nearly collapsed, and had to sell off huge chunks of their studio land just to stay alive. The place they sold off is now Century City in LA. Fox eventually recovered, but only after The Sound of Music came along in 1965 and saved the studio from ruin. When MGM put this movie out, They literally advertised it as the motion picture with something to offend everyone. The Loved One was a pitch-black satire on America's funeral industry, and it's got stuff like cremation cannons, rockets that shoot corpses into space, and an undertaker called Mr. Joyboy who still lives with his taxidermied mother. Tony Richardson directed it, fresh off his success with Tom Jones, and MGM thought they had another big prestige hit. But after they saw Richardson's cut, the studio execs totally freaked out. They wanted something mainstream and easy to sell. They got something totally weird instead. They ended up burying the movie, barely marketed it at all. And predictably, it completely bombed, making less than a quarter of its $4 million budget. This is one of those 60s movies that's just way ahead of its time. Directed by Richard Lester, it stars Julie Christie as unhappy married woman who gets into an affair with a divorced doctor played by George C. Scott. Pretty straightforward, except the way Lester tells it. Jump cuts everywhere, flash forwards, non-linear editing. Basically stuff no one was really doing in mainstream American movies back then. Filmed right before San Francisco's Summer of Love in 1967, it completely captures that psychedelic chaos. But it's also critical of it. Warner Brothers saw it, panicked, and had no idea how to market it. Test audiences hated it. The studio shelved it for a full year while they tried figuring out what to do. When they finally released it, critics actually loved it. Pauline Kael called it one of the best American films of the decade. But at the box office, nobody cared. It made back barely half of its $2.5 million budget,